Wyoming Territory, September 1880. The first shot rang out just after sundown, and by the time the third echoed off the saloon walls, Elira Gaines had blood on her hands that was not her own. The town of Cutter's Hollow had never been kind to women, but after her husband died last winter and the debts came due, it got meaner. Men who once tipped their hat now looked at her like she owed them something else. She had stayed for the sake of her daughter and son, but staying had cost them too much already. That night, when a drunken rancher tried to drag her from the dry goods store and the sheriff just turned away, Elira knew she would not survive another week in that place. She ran, not north, where the railroad men drank cheap whiskey and fought like dogs, and not east, where the law stretched thin and cruel. She went west, into the hills, with nothing but a threadbare coat, a rifle with 5 rounds, and her children pressed silent against her sides. They walked for 2 days before the storm hit. Valin, her son, only 8, had started to whimper from the cold, and little Vera, 6, was burning with fever. Elira wrapped them in what blankets she had and prayed under her breath, her back to the wind. She did not cry. She had no room left for it. By the time the snow eased, she could no longer feel her fingers. That was when she saw the horse. The man on its back rode slow, scanning the white hills like he had been out searching for something. He paused when he saw them 3 shapes in the snow, barely upright. Elira reached for her rifle with shaking hands, but her arm would not lift. He dismounted without a word, his long coat flapping in the wind, and crouched low beside them. His eyes were dark, steady, and unafraid. "You hurt?" he asked. She tried to answer, but her jaw barely worked. "Children. Fever." He nodded once. "Come on then." Elira remembered the strength of his arms lifting her daughter, then her son, then her. She remembered the warmth of the horse's hide pressed to her back, his chest behind her, steady and solid. She remembered thinking if this was death, it was not as cruel as she feared. She woke to firelight and the smell of broth. A cabin, small but warm. Her children lay on a cot beside her, tucked together under a buffalo hide. Vera's breathing was easier. Valin whispered to her, eyes wide. Elira pushed herself up, wincing. Her coat was gone, replaced by a clean shirt too broad for her shoulders. The man was at the stove, stirring something. He turned when he heard her move. "Name's Quillan Nash," he said simply. "You are safe here." Elira did not speak. Could not. Her throat felt scraped raw. "I found you east of Pine Ridge Creek," he continued. "Storm nearly buried your tracks. You were lucky." She looked at her children, then back at him. "Thank you." Quillan nodded and brought over a tin cup. "Drink slow." She drank. The warmth hit her stomach like a coal, painful and good. "You got a name?" "Elira," she said hoarsely. "Gaines." He sat across from her. Dark hair, a rough beard, eyes too kind for a man who lived alone in the hills. His hands were big, scarred, capable. He did not ask questions. He did not mention her torn coat or the bruises on her wrists. That night, she lay awake beside her children in the corner of his cabin, listening to the pop of the fire. Quillan sat in the chair by the hearth, rifle across his lap, as if daring the wind to try them again. Days passed. Vera's fever broke. Valin found a wooden horse carved on a shelf and played with it in the dirt beside the cabin. Quillan did not ask where they came from. He chopped wood, cooked stew, and taught Valin how to set snares. He gave Elira space, but never far. When she tried to help with chores, he handed her gloves without a word. One morning, she stepped outside to find him breaking ice from the water barrel. "I cannot stay," she said, the frost biting her cheeks. He looked up. "You could. They will come looking." "I hope they do," he said calmly, and swung the axe again. She stared at him. "You do not even know what I ran from." "I saw enough." That night, she found a mended shawl folded on her cot. It smelled of cedar. A week later, a rider came. Elira saw the dust before she saw the horse. She snatched her rifle, heart pounding. Quillan stepped outside first. "Stay in," he said to her. The man was from Cutter's Hollow. She recognized the coat, the sneer. He barely looked at Quillan. "Got word a woman and 2 brats ran this way. Town wants her back." Quillan stood still. "She is not there anymore. Law says she left a lawless town." Quillan said, voice quiet. "And she is not going back." The man laughed. "You planning to make that decision for her?" "I already did." The rider reached. Quillan moved faster. One shot. The man fell off the horse with a grunt and did not move again. Quillan stood over him a long moment, then turned to Elira. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, tears slipping down her cold cheeks. "He would have taken my daughter." "I know." He walked to her, slow. "Not touching, not forcing. I will not let them take you," he said. "Any of you." Elira looked up at him. For the first time in months, the fear was gone. "I know," she whispered. She stayed. Not because she had no choice, but because she saw something in Quillan Nash that she had not seen in a long time, a man who did not want to own her, fix her, or break her. He just stood beside her. She cooked while he repaired the roof. He taught Valen to ride. Vera followed him like a shadow, smiling more than she ever had. One night, after the children slept, she found him out by the corral, watching the stars. "You saved us," she said. He looked at her. "No, I just gave you a place to stop running." She stepped closer. "It is more than that." He did not answer, but he did not move away when she reached for his hand. It was rough and warm and real. And when he leaned down and kissed her, slow and sure, the cold in her chest cracked for good. She kissed him back like a woman alive again. The first frost held to the ground past dawn, silvering the grass along the ridge and stiffening the creek that ran behind the cabin. Quillan had already gone out by the time Elira pulled on her boots. She found him kneeling by the trapline with Valen, their breath curling in the morning air. Neither looked up when she approached, but Valen grinned and held up a rabbit by its hind legs. Quillan reached for the knife on his belt. "You want to learn how to clean it proper?" Valen nodded solemnly, eyes fixed on the blade. Elira crouched beside them, tucking Vera's wool scarf tighter around her neck. "Teach me too." Quillan's glance was brief, but something in it settled warm behind her ribs. "All right." They worked in quiet rhythm, hands red from the cold, the boy watching every motion. When the sun cleared the ridge, Elira stood and wiped her palms hard against her skirt. "I've been thinking about the house," she said. "If I'm staying, I want to put my hands to something more than stew and stitching." Quillan straightened up, brushing dirt from his knees. "What did you have in mind?" The root cellar's half collapsed. "No proper storage. And you're short on fence posts." His mouth curved, not in amusement, but something more approving. "I've got tools. Wood in the shed's green, but it'll hold till spring." She nodded. "Then I'll start after breakfast." That evening, she found herself beside Quillan again, hammer in hand, fitting crossbeams with more grit than grace. Her fingers blistered before noon, but she said nothing. He offered no pity, only handed her the next nail. When Valen and Vera fell asleep by the fire, Elira lingered outside, the lantern casting a narrow ring of light across the porch. Quillan was oiling a saddle, his motions slow and practiced. "You ever think about going back east?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Did once. After the war. Got as far as St. Louis before I realized there wasn't anything there for me." "What made you stop here?" He set the saddle down and wiped his hands on a rag. "I wanted to be somewhere I could hear myself think. Somewhere quiet enough to know the shape of my own bones." She leaned against the post, arms crossed. "You don't talk much about before. Doesn't mean I don't remember it." She let the silence stretch there, not out of discomfort, but because she understood. Then she said, "I used to be a schoolteacher." His eyes lifted. "You?" "I was 17 when I started. Taught in a one-room house with a broken stove and mice in the corners. I loved it. Then I married, and the man I loved turned into someone I didn't recognize." Quillan didn't move, but something in his stillness deepened. "I didn't stop teaching because I wanted to," she said. "I stopped because he said a wife had no business talking to other men's children." "I'm sorry." His voice was low, steady. "I'm not anymore." She looked at him then, really looked. "I want to teach again. Maybe just my own too for now. But I need that part of myself back." He nodded once. "Then we'll clear a space. I'll help you build what you need." Something swelled in her chest, nothing loud or sudden, just a quiet knowing. He didn't offer her a promise. He offered her a future she could shape. The next morning, she found a bundle of blank ledger paper on the table, old but clean. A stub of pencil rested beside it. She didn't ask where he found it. She just smiled, and when he came in from the cold, she handed him a cup of coffee and said, "I think I'll start the lessons this afternoon." He took the cup, fingers brushing hers. "I'll keep the little one busy while you do." She watched him go to the fire, watched the way Vera clambered into his lap without hesitation. Something in her heart loosened, not with fear or grief, but with gentle, blooming relief. She'd been running towards safety. Now, she was standing inside it. By late October, the air had turned sharp and clean, and the hills wore the copper tones of dying leaves. Elira stood beneath the cottonwood behind the cabin, her sleeves rolled up as she worked the churn. The butter came slow in the cold, but the rhythm steadied her thoughts. Vera sat nearby, threading beads onto a length of twine Quillan had cut from a fraying bridle. Inside, Valen read aloud from the McGuffey reader she'd salvaged from Quillan's storage chest. The boy's voice stumbled at longer words, but he kept going, his brow furrowed in quiet effort. Quillan returned from the northern ridge just after midday, his saddle dusted with pine needles, a brace of grouse hanging from one hand. Elira looked up. His coat was open, shirt damp at the collar, a flush of windburn across his cheek. "You're late," she said, not unkindly. Snow's holding on the far slope. Took longer to cross back. He held out the birds. "Got lucky." She took them, nodding. "I'll skin them before supper." He unsaddled the horse without speaking. She watched the tension in his shoulders, the set of his jaw. Something's wrong. Quillan paused, then looked toward the western hills. Smoke. Not ours. Maybe 3 miles out. Hunters. Could be. Or someone looking. She turned her gaze toward the horizon. "You think they'll come this way?" "I don't know yet. But I'll be ready if they do." That night, she left the door unlatched so the cold wouldn't wake the children when he stepped out. He stood guard again, same as he had that first week, but now she joined him, her shawl drawn tight. The lantern light inside flickered against the window panes, and the steady hush of wind moved through the trees. "You didn't ask if I wanted you to stay out here," she said softly. "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted it different." She studied the line of his profile, the way his hand rested near the shotgun propped against the porch rail. "Why are you alone out here?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, I had a younger brother. Name was Silas. We came out after the war, took work wherever we could. He wanted land of his own. I wanted quiet." She waited. 3 years ago, we signed on to a cattle drive out of Cheyenne. One night, a man picked a fight over cards. Silas never drew his pistol. Didn't matter. Her hand reached for his before she realized she'd moved. He let her take it. "I buried him up by the ridge," he continued. "Figured I'd stay close. Never saw much point in going farther." Elira pressed her fingers around his. "You've made something steady here." "I didn't, not really. It was just waiting." She shook her head. "No, you built something kind. That's different." He looked at her then, really looked. "You believe that. I live in it." Inside, the fire cracked softly. Vera stirred once in her sleep, then settled again. Quillan's voice dropped low. "I keep wondering if I'll lose this too." "You won't. You can't know that. I know what I won't do. I won't leave." He exhaled, not in relief, but in something gentler. His hand moved to where hers rested against his coat, and he laced their fingers slow. "I didn't think I'd feel this again," he said. She stepped closer, their hands between them. "I didn't think I'd feel safe again." He bent his head, and she reached up to meet him. Their kiss tasted like frost and fire, like something earned slowly, without rush or demand. Later, when they went back inside, she watched him lift Vera from the cot and carry her to the bed. Valen stirred, eyes opening just long enough to see her, then closed again, trusting. Elira crawled in beside them all, her body warm from the fire and the man beside her. She did not dream of running. She did not dream of loss. She dreamed of roots, of steady hands, of a life not taken, but chosen. The first snow came soft and early, blanketing the roof before the sun had risen. Elira opened the door to a world gone quiet. The trees bowed under white weight, the trail to the shed nearly lost beneath it. She stood a moment, letting the chill bite her skin. Warmth drifted from the hearth behind her, but she didn't step back inside. Not yet. Quillan joined her wordlessly, pulling on wool-lined gloves as he looked out over the ridge. His breath steamed in the air as he adjusted his hat against the snowfall. "You ever trap in this deep?" she asked, her voice low. "Only when I had to." "Snow like this, it muffles sound, but not hunger." She nodded, thinking of the snares they'd set days earlier. "I'll go with you." He gave her a look, not questioning, only weighing. Then he said, "Bring the axe." some of the lines likely frozen shut. They moved quiet through the woods, boots sinking into drifts that reached the tops of their calves. Quillan found each snare without hesitation, brushing snow aside with the toe of his boot. The first yielded a fox, already stiff. It would stretch their supplies, but she could see in his face it wasn't enough. By the time they reached the last bend of the ridge, her muscles ached. She leaned on the axe handle, breath uneven, and watched him kneel beside the final trap. It was empty. Quillan stayed crouched, fingers brushing the disturbed snow around it. Then he pointed. Track curves wide. Whatever it was too heavy for Fox. Could be a lone wolf. She stepped closer. Will it circle back? Maybe. He stood slowly, brushing snow from his knees. Or it's moving through, following deer. Either way, we'll need to check the barn. Make sure nothing's drawn close. They turned back before the light shifted. The wind had picked up, lifting snow off the trees in sudden gusts. When they reached the cabin, Valen was hauling wood inside, his cheeks red from the cold. Vera sat cross-legged near the stove, a piece of jerky in her hand, and a shawl bundled around her shoulders. Elira knelt beside her daughter, brushing snow from her sleeve. Any trouble? Valen answered from the doorway. Heard something behind the barn. Didn't see what. Quillan didn't hesitate. He stepped out again, rifle already in hand. Elira followed, her fingers tight around the axe handle. The tracks were clear now, a wide loop near the edge of the fence, fresh and deliberate. Quillan crouched low, pressing his fingers into one of them. Not a wolf, he said. Boot print. Her breath caught. He rose slowly, gaze sweeping the tree line. They're watching. She looked toward the hills, but nothing moved. We'll not wait for them to come closer, he said. Tonight, we'll keep the lanterns low. And I'll set the tripwire. We need a place for the children to sleep that isn't by the window. I'll move the cot into the pantry. Thicker walls. That evening, they sat at the table without saying much. Vera nibbled at a biscuit, unaware. Valen kept one hand near the hunting knife Quillan had let him carry since the start of fall. Elira watched the door. When the children were asleep, she found Quillan in the barn, checking the latch on the side door. She stepped inside, closing the space between them. I want to know what you'll do if they come. He didn't turn. I'll make sure they don't reach the house. That wasn't what I asked. He turned then, his eyes dark in the lantern glow. If someone's come this far to take you back, I don't intend to let them leave. She reached for his coat, pressing her forehead to his chest. I don't want you to get yourself killed. I won't. You don't know that. I do, he said quietly. Because I've got something to stay alive for now. She looked up at him, her breath catching. You never said that before. I didn't need to. You're here. That's the whole truth of it. She touched his cheek, thumb brushing the edge of his jaw. Then let's be ready. Together. They stepped out into the cold. The snow had stopped, and the sky above was wide with stars. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, the children tucked safe behind the pantry door. She stood beside him on the porch, her hand in his. And whatever waited in the trees, it would find them watching back. Together. By mid-morning, the wind shifted. The air carried the bite of wood smoke again, but this time it was closer, sharper. Elira felt it before she saw it, the way the hairs on her arms lifted beneath her sleeves. She glanced toward the tree line, where the pines stood thick and quiet, and then back to the cabin where Vera sat inside with a pile of cracked corn and Valen was stringing a line of dried apples across the mantel. Quillan stepped in from the barn, snow melting off his shoulders. His face was unreadable, but he pulled the rifle from behind the door and checked the chamber with practiced hands. They've moved in, he said, voice low. How many? 2. Maybe 3. They're staying low. She nodded, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. How close? Far enough they think we don't see them. Close enough they'll try tonight. She crossed the room, her voice even. We'll move the children to the cellar. If they come, they won't see them. He watched her for a beat, then reached to the shelf and took down a small tin box. Inside were rolled cartridges, oiled cloth, and a stub of charcoal. He handed it to her. You know how to shoot? I do. I'll take the east fence. You watch the north. She didn't hesitate. Once they know we're not alone, they'll hesitate. That's the point. They moved through the house without panic, but with purpose. Valen helped carry quilts to the cellar, his mouth set hard, no questions asked. Vera clutched her doll and followed close. When Elira knelt beside them in the dirt-floored dark, she touched each of their faces. You stay quiet, you hear? No matter what you hear above, we'll come back for you. Vala nodded, jaw clenched. She closed the trapdoor and pushed the rug back across it. Night dropped fast. The cold deepened with it. Quillan was already outside, crouched behind the woodpile. Elira took her place by the north window, the rifle steady in her arms. The lantern had been snuffed. The only light came from the hearth's low glow and the stars above, brittle and clear. An hour passed, then another, a soft crunch of snow, then a voice, low and tense, from the trees. Gaines, woman, we know you're here. Elira raised the rifle, jaw tight. We're not looking for trouble, just the girl. Quillan's voice cut through the dark, clear and cold as steel. She's not yours. There was a pause. Then a gunshot cracked through the trees. Elira didn't flinch. She waited. Another shot rang out, this one closer. Something moved by the barn. She fired once. A shape fell. Then silence. Another figure broke for the trees. Quillan moved fast one shot, then another. The second man hit the snow with a thud that echoed off the hill. Then quiet again. Elira waited, breath shallow, until Quillan's voice rose from the yard. It's done. She lowered the rifle and stepped outside. Snow had settled over the fallen bodies, already softening their outlines. Quillan stood over them, his breath slow and even. She joined him, her boots crunching softly in the snow. Do you know them? He nodded once. One worked for the sheriff. The other two were hired hands. They weren't going to stop. No, she looked at him in the starlight. And now, they won't send more. They sent these thinking it would be easy. Elira stood beside him in the stillness. Then she reached for his hand. We go forward now, she said. He turned to her, his face worn with the night, but clear. You still want to stay? She nodded. I want to build roots here. With you. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles slow. Then we will. They buried the men by the ridge at dawn. The children never asked who they were. They didn't need to. By the week's end, Quillan had cleared the south slope. Elira stitched heavy curtains for the windows and taught Valen how to read the weather by the clouds. Vera learned her letters by drawing in the frost on the windows each morning. Before the snow melted, Quillan carved her name into the beam over the hearth, not as a mark of ownership, but of belonging. They built a small room off the back of the cabin come spring. Elira filled it with chalkboards and shelves. Neighbors from over the ridge began sending their children to learn, and by midsummer, the room echoed with spelling recitations and the sound of chalk ticking over slate. Quillan took to writing out less. He tended the animals and fixed the roof before the rains came. He built a bench under the cottonwood, where Elira sometimes sat in the evenings, watching the sun drop behind the hills. One night, as the children slept and the fire burned low, Elira took his hand and pressed it to her belly. He looked at her, then at her hand, then back to her. You're sure? She smiled. I am. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You've given me everything I never thought I'd have. She whispered. We gave it to each other. They lay together that night with nothing between them but warmth and breath. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, and the stars held steady overhead. Years passed. The schoolhouse grew. The cabin stretched to fit more laughter. Quillan built a cradle that rocked with a gentle creak, and Elira taught reading from the same worn McGuffey that had once rested on their shelf. Some evenings, when the sun dipped low and the hills turned to gold, they sat on the porch together, fingers laced, watching their children run through the tall grass. They didn't speak much on those nights. They didn't need to. Their love was not loud. It was not sudden. It was steady, and it lasted.